Good evening, my dear friends and family. Guten Abend. It's a pleasure to see you, my friends. Today I am with DW PHILLIPS as promised. Yesterday, unfortunately, I failed due to sickness, but today we made it. We already have Newman and Bridget and Ethan and Smith. It's very, very good to see you, my friends. DW, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic today, Starsky. Your nighttime is my afternoon. It's good to be back with you today.
Same here, likewise. And recently we made the interview for the UATV. By the way, my dear friends, you can check it on the channel of UATV, and you can also check it in the community posts of my channel. Please do. I think that one was absolutely fantastic. And also, if you didn't do it so far, please make sure to watch the Cave of Mine. Those series are absolutely amazing. I will be watching this together with my woman. So if you don't mind, it's really good.
Well, Starsky, given the fact that there's so much love in Cave of Mine, I think it's a good thing for you to watch it with your woman, and I want to hear how she responds, if she loves it as much as we're hearing from other people out there. So if you're watching this today, link on to the Cave of Mine link below, share it with your friends, share it with your families, get the word out there that there is a love letter from Ukraine that every American, every European needs to watch. I think you'll have a fun time watching it. It's very entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Zuri Moore and Stephen and Sarah. It's good to see you. And Jose, Ladybird, Dollar Straws, David, Anne, and Rosalind, and everybody else. James, hello, and Salt, and it wasn't me. Guten Abend. So let's first check out several updates because we have quite a few of those. First of all, the murder of Ukrainian in the United States, DeCarlos Brown Jr., who murdered Irina Zalutska. Zalutska just several months ago. He will most probably face the death penalty. Again, I am translating, but literally it's written in English language. I have literally no idea why I'm doing this, but we have some really crazy footage showing Ukrainian military who actually showcase how exactly they launched the drones flying 2,000 kilometers deep into the Russian territory. Let's check it out. DW, can you see it on your screen?
I sure can. It's impressive.
Awesome. Let's do this. So this one is, I believe, Bobber, the beaver. Judging from its engine, DW, do you know this engine? Looks like Rotax to me, but at the same time, I don't think so. And they follow it on the car. That one looks impressive, and those are the very drones that fly literally thousands and thousands of kilometers, striking terror Russian oil facilities and other facilities and military plants. What do you think?
I think we need to.
Yeah.
I was going to say we need to think of 2025. A little bit in 2024, but especially 2025 as the year that the inside of Russia it will never be safe again. It will never be safe again. Putin has no control over what takes place in his own country, and Ukraine, yet again, has led the way in the technology and in the appropriate aggressive response. It's actually quite encouraging. We want Putin on his heels and afraid. Videos like you've just shown us, I don't think make the Kremlin happy.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, remember that very first attack on Kremlin when the drone actually hit one of the domes?
Yes.
Not
too long ago.
Yeah. There were so many speculations. Some people were saying that actually Russians did it themselves. Other people were saying that actually no, actually it was a legit attack. And recently, I believe chief of SBU actually reported that yeah, it was our operation, and actually Ukrainian drone reached Kremlin, and it's crazy. What do you think about that?
I think that every time that Ukraine strikes a legitimate military target, which, by the way, is not only architectural or military bases, but when we take out a Russian general, for example, in Moscow, that's consistent with the rules of war. Let's remember the battlefield is all of Ukraine right now, and therefore the battlefield is all of Russia right now. And any individual that's engaged in active warfare, even if he's on home to get his orders, is a legitimate target. We need to let Moscow and the Kremlin know nothing is safe. Absolutely nothing is safe. We're taking the war to them. It's going to be constant. They should be afraid. It's good news.
Yeah, 100%. And currently we can see that the very fact that Ukrainian drones fly to places like freaking Chelyabinsk. Oh my God, Chelyabinsk. Bashkortostan, those places, that's absolutely impressive. Currently, by the way, President Zelensky mentioned that Ukraine can strike targets as deep as 3,000 kilometers on the Russian territory. How crazy is that? I have a question for you because I want to know your opinion. So before the meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump in the White House, before the recent meeting that took place in Washington D.C., there like several updates emerged on Ukrainian military actually coming to the Washington D.C. to establish cooperation with the American military regarding drones. So most probably they were talking about the expanding the development of drones on the United States territory, which I believe is something very, very interesting to talk about. What is your opinion on that? Because we can see, again, this kind of shifting, this floating rhetorics regarding Ukraine in the White House, but at the same time we can see like real cooperation between two armies. What does it mean?
Well, the first thing to remember is that our Pentagon and our military is made up of tiers of individual. So the reality is that sometimes the leaders of our country in the Trump administration, President Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, actually know very little compared to what some of the people that work for them underneath them actually know about military warfare, where things are going right now. We've seen, I don't know if you remember that when back earlier this year, President Trump was giving out messages that Ukrainian soldiers were surrounded in Kursk and were about to be annihilated. And he made an appeal to Putin, and he said to Putin, please, I beg you, don't kill all of these soldiers. At least that's the story he gave us. The reality was they had already pulled out. And I mention this because the actual military knowledge and information at the highest level of the United States of America has repeatedly demonstrated an abysmal level of ignorance, and it's actually quite shocking. So let's talk about drones. I'm not sure that the Secretary of War really understands the significance of drone warfare and what's taken place with Ukraine. Ukraine has led the world. Ukraine has brought us into the 21st century. Ukrainians are innovators like no one else on planet Earth. But there are people at the White House, people at the Pentagon who do understand. And the meetings are taking place between Ukrainian officials and many of them. And I hope that it will become a point of leverage where Ukraine is able to say, look, we really, as Zelensky has said, we really can bring a lot to the table that America needs. Keep in mind that when Putin told Zelensky, you don't need those tomahawks because don't give them to Ukraine, it will hurt our friendship, it will hurt our relationship. Trump came out and Trump's message is, we need to kind of protect our tomahawks. Well, America has thousands and thousands and thousands of tomahawks. We're talking about giving less than 100 to Ukraine. So that had nothing to do with it. It had everything to do with Putin. But the drones are a leverage point. And the more Ukraine explains to the president and explains to people within the military infrastructure, this is something we have that you don't have. Not the way we have it, And if you want to be able to fight wars in the 21st century, America needs to come up to speed to where Ukraine is right now. Ukraine is at the front line.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I hope that Ukrainian experience, Ukrainian skills in drone production will be absolutely vital for the American army, because we want our allies to be strong. We want our allies to be protected and defended against the terrorist drones. 100%. Another thing I would really like to see is, the feedback, because cooperation always works both ways, and I really like to see, for example, Ukrainian drones being improved using the American technology, because United States also have like this huge and amazing industry. And speaking of those 5,000 Ukrainians surrounded in Kursk, poor guys, literally, I'm still looking for them. Like I don't know, I'm checking news every single day. Probably we should send them, I don't know, like some bread, some water, find them finally, because that was absolutely cringy. But do you think that...
Starsky, think about this. Think about this for just a second. America has the leading military infrastructure, I think military in the world. It's absolutely remarkable, and it transcends president. We're going to have our military when Trump is gone. We had our military before Trump was here, but a president can have a very big impact. All the people in the United States, the person who should be best informed is the president of the United States. Until recently, it appears as if much of the information that President Trump has received has come from two sources: directly from Putin, like the Kursk example, Putin on the telephone saying, here's the military layout on the ground. Trump believed him. And the second is Tulsi Gabbard, our director of national intelligence, who might as well be Putin. She's the closest thing to Putin in the history of American politics. There has never been a person more sick and who better articulates Kremlin talking points than the person in charge of our security institutions. It's just, as an American who loves my country, it's absolutely painful. She has to go. We want her out of there. She's dangerous.
I can agree on that. And by the way, is there a chance for you to increase your sound just a bit? Because in my software, you're like...
Oh, I see.
Yeah. In my software,
Okay,
you're
let's see what I'm doing here.
100% already. I cannot crank it anymore.
Okay, let me see if it's not connected properly. Hold on just 1 second, and we'll check this out. Forgive me. It sounds like I'm thinking that my microphone is not going through. Let's see, USB audio, it says it is. So am I sounding soft to you?
You're sounding well generally, but again, I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm listening to you with just one ear, so I cannot tell.
Okay. I'm not sure how to fix it. I'll try to talk. Does this sound any better when I talk into the microphone?
Yeah,
Or
I
is it the
guess so.
same?
I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. I'll see if I can be even more direct into the microphone.
Thank you very much. We have a special guest today. We have Sparky Project's greeting from the Cardiff Oblast. Do you know the story behind the Cardiff Oblast?
I do not.
So, like 2022, I believe, either 2022 or 2023, all sorts of Russian propagandists were literally explaining how hard it is to live nowadays in European countries because Europe is not receiving gas and Russian sanctions and blah blah blah. And they said that people in Cardiff, poor people in Cardiff, literally have to do prostitution to survive. I shit you not, like it was like that. They said women in Cardiff have to do prostitution, I don't know, probably men as well. And also because they don't have gas anymore, they have to literally prepare food on a radiator. Like they have to heat up their provision and stuff on the radiator. And since that time, literally, I just cannot throw the Cardiff out of my heart. You know, every single day I just wake up, I pray for the people of Cardiff, and I send them all the best wishes and like the rays of energy, because that place probably suffered much more than, I don't know, any other European place after the beginning of this Russian war. And we have commentary also from Sarah. I hope to see Solovyov and other propagandists punished. They are guilty too, which I completely agree. And I already have another question for you, DW. So recently it was announced that Russians will increase their external propaganda expenditures by almost 54%. Which means that basically the disinformation that we can see nowadays around European countries and basically around the world will expand. Like, of course, a bunch of those money will be snatched. We all know that, but the disinformation will grow. I believe that more new bloggers and different YouTubers will be involved in this. And Russians already did, the Russia Today did the courses actually for different foreign bloggers and foreign journalists, trying to expand their ecosystem of propagandists around the world. What do you think we can expect in the nearest future? Because my prediction is that Trump's position towards Ukraine will be shifting again over time. Nowadays, everybody might agree that his position is not like it was in February or even March. It shifted. Ukraine expands cooperation with the United States. Do you think that we might see more trash and more dirt, literally, thrown at United States and more Russian bloggers operating in the United States? Because generally the biggest number of pro-Russian propagandists, according to different studies, actually operate on the territory of the US.
It's actually hard to imagine that the Russian state can do more disinformation than they already have. Russia is the leading disinformation nation in the history of the world. There never has been another nation as committed to disinformation, to infiltration through using all sorts of disinformatia as is true of Russia. They are the masters of disinformation. And as you and I both know, this war is fought on two foundations. One is actually on the battlefield, and the second is the information war. And Ukraine has done very well when you look at the story of the battlefield. Here in America, Ukraine has not done as well in the information space because Ukraine isn't fighting the information war except through normal channels, whereas Russia uses every possible channel imaginable. And I don't know if you remember, it was maybe about 4 months ago that one of our leading woke right podcasters, it was discovered that he was getting millions of dollars in aid and subsidies from Russia that was working through a filtration company. And he didn't even claims not to even know who these people were, but they were paying him, $1 million, some incredible sum of money per episode to shill for Russia. So how will Russia be doing this moving forward? Absolutely, they're going to do it through third parties. They're going to try to buy people off. But there are different ways to do that. You can do that through trips. You can do that through money. You can do that through meetings. But of course, they're going to be hitting it very, very hard. And they're going to be playing upon the woke right MAGA base, who have been the main communicators. If you'll notice, yesterday, for example, Tucker Carlson, and I'd just like to say about Tucker Carlson, he didn't start off this way as being a person who hates freedom and a person who, I would say, there's probably no man in the United States of America who has done more to contribute to the persecution of faith groups in Russia than Tucker Carlson, because he's always claiming that Ukraine is persecuting Christians when it's actually the Muscovite Patriarchy which is doing it. I don't know of anyone who has done more to shield and enable the Russian army of rapists, murderers, and torturers than Tucker Carlson through the misinformation he has out there. But I don't think Tucker Carlson has to work for the Kremlin officially to be a de facto Kremlin asset, because what the Kremlin is good at, and this is what we're going to see more of, is positioning Americans against each other, where they end up saying the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the great victory that the Kremlin had a couple of years ago was to turn Ukraine into Joe Biden's war, because every person who didn't like Joe Biden then didn't like Ukraine. And those of us that were fighting against that very, very hard had a difficult time fighting against the prejudice and the corruption of that kind of thinking, which Russia is absolutely excellent at doing. So, Starsky, I think we're going to see it take place not only in the podcast. Hey, listen, Candace Owens, who gets 3 to 4 million people watching her every day, who has stirred up a lot of controversy within America. A week and a half ago, she went on her broadcast and she told millions and millions of Americans that Charlie Kirk was murdered by a Ukrainian terrorist cell that had been working within America. She literally made it up. And she told that. So Russia does a great job of taking advantage of that. And if you just, as you know, Starsky, you watch RT and any Russian state media, and they just laugh and they laugh and they laugh at how gullible, how foolish we are in the face of their propaganda. They're so good at it.
Unfortunately, that's true. And, the freedom of speech is a great weapon, but at the same time, it's a great vulnerability. And we cannot suppress the freedom of speech. And the only thing we can do, I believe, is to grow the army of people who debunk disinformation, who expose fakes, because that's probably the most effective thing to do. What do you think?
I think so. And if you happen to be a very, very wealthy person out there who believes in Ukraine, I would suggest to you that it's time that we really start funding the people that are tearing apart the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and showing that these people are communicating fraudulent information to America. And also, getting back to our film Kyiv of mine, doing more than just cursing the darkness. We need to be lighting candles. Part of our information message needs to be love, hope, value, belief, beauty. That's what we did with our film. And if you're just tuning in, make sure to click onto it, share it with your friends, and watch it, because it's a love letter of hope. But in America, we have to fight a lot of different propaganda fronts. We have just factual information, like America gave Ukraine $350 billion. That's just completely false. We have factual information. Well, we don't know who actually started the war. Really? Seriously? And do we also believe in leprechauns and that the moon is made out of cheese? Apparently some Americans do. And when the president says that, they do. But we put information in the hands of our Ukraine sympathetic leaders in America, and they just need to be constantly putting it out there. But we also need to win the hearts of Americans. And this is where a big part of me is just with Kyiv of mine, let them feel the love of this nation and see Americans have a lot to learn from Ukraine. We have a lot to identify with Ukraine, because I'm just guessing now, but I would say that at least 50% of Kremlin disinformation campaigns, which they're now upping, are geared at communicating contempt for Ukrainians. Ukrainians are Nazis. Ukrainians are little old 8th century babushkas. They are gangsters. They're incompetent. They can't do anything. Literally the opposite of the truth. And Winston Churchill pointed out, it takes only a minute for a lie to spread around the world, but it takes a very long time to then go back and rebut and pull those lies out of the minds of people who become very susceptible when they hear it over and over and over and over again. So it's a reason why I love your show, Starsky, because you're just always on point on this issue, helping people to sift through the disinformation. But see, the problem is, and I know you'll take this in good heart, you're Ukrainian. Americans need to hear from Americans also who are tearing this down, not just Ukrainians, because they'll say, well, he's a Ukrainian. Unfortunately, I don't think they should, but they'll say that. But when they hear it from Americans and from people around the world, like our film crew, our film team behind Kyiv of mine, international people, South Africa, all over the place, they need to hear that too. They need to hear from Brits, from Americans, that here's what the truth is. It's not that long ago. My father worked with a man on publishing a book called Disinformation during the 1980s of the Reagan administration. If you look it up on Amazon, you can still purchase it. Disinformation was about Russian disinformation campaigns. That was during the height of the Cold War. Americans all understood that then. It's as if we've been brainwashed and we don't even realize that we are being pounded daily by Russian disinformation. And I think Russia is very happy because it's a lot easier for them if they can just persuade other people to be the torchbearers for them. They don't even need to pay them. They just incentivize them by getting them to hate the other side and to use it as a political tool.
I completely agree with you, and 100% that Americans should hear it from not only from Ukrainians that are, party in this war, but also from other people, and specifically from the American people who
Everybody.
actually came to Ukraine and saw it themselves. Let's check out.
Yep.
Let's check out several commentaries. Goldfingers, I predict Russians will be eating rats this winter. Generally, I believe so, because they already made that cringy advertisement about Ukrainians eating hamsters. I believe they already prepare some of the specific recipes that they can use. Hoops Groove, what film have you got a link? My friend, in the title of this video, please find Kyiv of Mine, the address of the channel, and you can click on it, and there's a series of this documentary. Please check it out. Goldfingers, Americans believe in UFOs and Bigfoot, which generally I do too, because UFO, Ukrainian flying objects, we can see them every single night flying towards Russian oil refineries like crazy. Bigfoot, that's literally me. I'm like 175 centimeters tall, and I have literally like 43rd size, all right? So I saw them. They exist. All right. But DW, you touched something very, very interesting, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's very interesting. Since I would say 2023, in the social media, specifically on Twitter, of course, I noticed a lot of tags saying that Russia is not the enemy. And one interesting fact is that this is some of the most popular tags. Actually, you can look it up on Twitter and other social media. Russians chose different approach, actually, and nowadays, of course, they use people, for example, like my God, Douglas McGregor, Scott Ritter, and also Joe Rogan. That is literally hysterical. Like, Russians are so mighty and strong and yada yada. But how tall is Starsky? Sarah, 175 centimeters. But at the same time, the main Russian propagandist machine directed at the United States is basically saying, we're not the enemy, we are your friends. We are like your buddies, and actually we can work together, we can divide the world, we can join our forces. United States and Russian Federation are so good because, for example, if we check out this dude, that's Kirill Dmitriev, right? So this very dude, as far as I remember, when Pete Hegseth wore that Russian flag on his necktie, right, and showed up on a meeting with President Zelensky, this dude on the screen, he actually commented on that in the social media, and he's like shaking hands and everything else, like winking and things like that. So the Russian strategy is actually kind of cunning. Like, officially, they're not trying to terrify United States, all right, like they did, for example, during the Cold War, with nukes, with their ships based in Cuba, which is the case today, by the way, from Cuba to Florida. How much? Like 50, something like that, 50, 90 miles. That's the case today. But officially, they say, no, we gotta work together. Russia is not your enemy. Everyone else is your enemy. And unfortunately, a lot of people actually fall for this trap, because how can you be friends with Russian terrorists? How can you be friends with people who literally were saying, like, let's destroy United States their whole life? And were hating it, and they still do, but actually they kind of changed that rhetoric and make Americans believe that they are actually so welcoming, towards the American people. What do you think about this?
Well, the classic example is our president. Our president yesterday went on television. He said, Every time I talk to Vladimir, he's always nice to me, and we seem to get along great. And then he doesn't do anything afterwards. It's almost as if the Russians and Putin and the Kremlin and Lavrov and Peskov and all of these different men, not so much Medvedev, nobody takes him seriously, but everyone else is able to just wave the magic wand and look into the eyes, and their eyes start rolling like this. Now, I think that in our present administration, there is a natural tendency to want to be mesmerized because they're still thinking back in the 1980s and the 1990s about the mythology of Russia, this mysterious, massive state. And they're also thinking about, hey, we can rule the world together, as you pointed out. We can do deals. I can have Trump Tower in Moscow. I can do amazing things. All we need to do is get past this stupid little war. And once again, we can make movies and have giant ships. And I actually think they like oligarchs. I think there's something which is very enticing to President Trump about the oligarchs. He doesn't hate them, which is why when we talk about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the White House has never made this an issue of right versus wrong or a moral issue under the Trump administration. I think that's our great weakness, is that we've made it transactional. It's no longer, there's no sense of, is it wrong to murder, rape, and kill? Well, we're not going to get into that. We're just going to ask who has more power, who has more money, who can do more things. And when you abandon a moral foundation for freedom, you abandoned everything. And you abandon the American ideal. America is literally based on a document which appeals to God as the foundation for freedom, being transcendent, not transactional. That's how we started this whole thing. So to reject that at the presidential level is very, very significant. And it opens the door for this mythology. Now, Kirill Dmitriev, this is a bad guy. He is a really, really bad guy. Why is he so involved? It's because he's cutting all sorts of multi-billion-dollar deals. When Witkoff came for the last time to Moscow, our special envoy to Russia, the worst envoy in the history of the United States, when he arrives in Moscow, what's the first thing he does? He goes to a very, very fancy restaurant before he meets with Putin, and he's there with Kirill Dmitriev. And, they're looking at the beauty of things, and the restaurant is all about the glory of Russia, the history of Russia, its art, the Bolshoi, and all these things. And not accidentally, by the way, I'm guessing, they have these sort of fusion dishes that they serve at this restaurant right outside of Moscow, which are made up of little pieces of food from all the regions that Russia claims to have hegemony over. And Witkoff is eating that. And I can just imagine Dmitriev there, feeding him the propaganda. And given the fact that Witkoff's son, also a billionaire, is going around cutting deals with these people, and in fact working with the Trump family on some of these deals, I think that this romance, this sort of the glory of the ancient days of Russia alive today, and the splendor of the oligarchs, and the history, I think they have been bewitched by this, and they have to get it out of their head. We need people to tell them the Russian army is an institutional rapist army. They have been rapists forever. The biggest mass rape event took place in 1945 and has been taking place every single day in occupied Ukraine. They are torturers. Putin runs the single largest child trafficking ring by a state, maybe since Genghis Khan. Certainly, of the last 100 years, there has never been a child trafficker of the scope and the extent of Putin. This is what they need to remember, not this Potemkin city called Moscow, where they go to the grocery stores and Tucker Carlson says, it's so clean. It's so nice. Look at the subways. There's no graffitis. Yeah, that's right. If you're going to be executed for putting up graffiti, you're going to have clean subways. That's what happens whether you're going to North Korea or you're going to Moscow. And Americans have historically said, we don't want anything to do with that, except for the present administration.
I agree on that. And the funniest fact is that the grocery store wasn't even Russian grocery store. It was literally Auchan, the French grocery store in Russia. But anyways...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he went to Ashan and literally like look at this magic. The cart stays on the escalator. How the hell is this possible? Like what kind of magic is that? Like literally you go to freaking Kaufland in any German city, there's the same shit. In Ukraine, like any epicenter, you go to epicenter mall and like
Yeah, I've got a message to Americans and Europeans who are watching this who haven't been to Ukraine. And by the way, there's two ways to know about Ukraine. Number one, go there, and number two, watch our film Kyiv of Mine, link below. But here's my message. Here's my message. I have never been to nicer gas stations anywhere in the world than in Ukraine. They're cleaner, they're nicer. You want to sit and have a meal in them. It's not like that in the United States of America. It's not even like that in France and Belgium and England. Ukrainians really have got it right on so many different levels. And of course, Kyiv is a wonderful example of that, but it's all over Ukraine.
absolutely. I remember Warsaw 2014 when you go to, for example, Żabka or Biedronka and you order this amazing hot dog, and I'm like, oh my god, it would be so good if we had those hot dogs in Ukraine because they have like this French bun. And then just couple of years after that, they emerge everywhere in Ukraine. You probably know, like you go to any gas station, DWOG, for example, in Kyiv,
Yeah.
and those are fantastic. Like you can eat like pig there, and everything is just so good. Shell,
It's
Vogue,
so
yeah.
the gas station. This is not an exaggeration. The gas stations have gourmet food. On the drive from Lviv to Kyiv, you don't need to ever stop at a restaurant. Just go to the gas stations because you'll sit down. Everything is super clean. The food is absolutely delicious. There's a wide menu that you can pick from, whether you want fast or whether you want something which is very nice. It's amazing. And again, there's nothing like that in the very wealthy United States of America that doesn't have bombs dropping on it.
Yeah.
What Ukraine has accomplished in the middle of war is extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. And that's another reason why Ukrainians, to me, are very lovable and inspirational, because most people just roll over. Most people give up. Most people quit. I'm not sure I want to say the word thrive in the sense of, the nation thriving while bombs are dropping, but there's a sense of individual thriving that people are just going to live fully and do better. And you see that in the infrastructure of how life continues to be lived. People dress very, very nicely in Ukraine. They eat very, very well. They have incredible technology there. Incredible technology with their phones and everything. Amazing. In this respect, I think they're the wonder of the world in terms of what they are accomplishing given the impediments of a Russian invasion.
Absolutely. Micro-based studio, by the way, I would say not like thrive, but live, not just
That's
exist,
a good way to put it.
not try
Yep.
to survive, but literally live because why not? And Micro-based studio asks, can you eat the sushi at gas station? So I shit you not, Okko gas station, OKKO. The other day I was like in 2023 maybe. I was at Oko going to our training ground, and I stopped there because I wanted some chicken, and they serve, besides all the hot dogs and everything else, they serve the best chicken nuggets like in the world. All right, they are just so good. And you buy like this big box of chicken nuggets, big box of fresh potato, and like you just enjoy. My God, I'm drooling. So they were selling sushi there, and I'm like, okay, cancel chicken McNuggets. We're gonna have sushi, and I literally bought like 3 boxes. I ate them in the car. I was barely, able to push the pedal because I was just so full. Speaking of food, because like it's our constant topic on this channel, what is your favorite stuff to eat when you are in Kyiv?
I don't even know what to say. I like it so much of everything. In some respects, I like fancy, but I also like simple. I'm very happy with some sala, some black bread, and a bowl of borscht. Makes me really, really happy. When I'm in the Ivano-Frankivsk and Carpathian region, I like the local food there. It's wonderful. When I go to Ukraine, I also eat Georgian food. What the Georgians do with cheese, absolutely incredible. It's amazing. So I can go simple, I can go fancy, but I always know that when I eat a Ukrainian dish, I'm going to eat something I'm not going to find here in America. Uh, I have a Ukrainian bakery and restaurant down the street from me. That's the closest I get here in America. But I'm really happy with something simple. I'm happy with bread and sala and borscht. It makes me very happy.
Oh my God, bread and salad borscht, that's already a feast. We have. I would ask you this: what do you think about the suluguni, the Georgian smoked cheese? Are you a fan or not? Because I tried to understand it, but
I will tell you, I do like it. I like all of the different variations. Their breads, oh my! There's a Georgian restaurant right in the center of Kyiv. My son and I went there on a trip not long ago and just feasted all night at this place. I don't what they do, the way they put the cheese on the bread, and it's just wow. You can just eat it all night. And in America, when I eat bread, I feel sick afterwards because it's full of all sorts of things that are not good for you. You gain weight, you feel lethargic and tired. Not so much when I'm eating Georgian bread or Ukrainian black bread. I feel great afterwards. My stomach feels great afterwards because it's all natural. It's well made, which is another thing that Americans can learn from Ukrainians, which is that we have so many chemicals in our food in America that we don't eat healthy. Americans are fat and they don't eat healthy. You don't see that so much in Ukraine.
I guess so. I have a different question. How do you think, what can Ukrainians learn from Americans?
Excuse me. My goodness. I think there's both positive and negative things. One of the things, let me talk about some negative things, which I say reluctantly because I want to emphasize how much I love my country, how much I believe in my country, and I support my country. I am a lover of American history and of American culture. I enjoy it so much. Even though my great-grandfather came from Lviv, I feel fully American in all those different senses. However, the present moment is not a positive time for our country. And one thing Ukrainians can learn is that political infighting and contempt towards your fellow American or towards your fellow citizen can actually destroy a country. It can remove your love for liberty. It can make everything extremely tribal. And Ukrainians are fighters. They'll beat each other up in a fight if they need to, but they will stick together against the enemy every single day of the week. It's like a family. You know, families bicker, but don't mess with the family or we're going to come after you. We've kind of lost that in America. Now we bicker and we hate each other more than we hate Putin. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. So I would say, especially as we move forward in Ukraine towards victory, learn the lessons of what not to do that Americans are doing now. Now, let me give you some positive examples. Americans historically have been, there was a great writer. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville. He was a Frenchman. And he came to America in the 1840s and he wrote a book, and the book was called Democracy in America. Everyone should read this book. And he talks about what the world can learn from America. He says Americans are generous. They care about people around the world. They're incredibly hospitable. He talks about their resilience and their fight. It sounds like he's describing Ukrainians in 2025, actually. And this whole spirit of America actually is still here. We still have it. We're just in the middle of a big, gigantic fight and skirmishes. And I think we've developed some very bad habits. But if you look back to the prior generation, remember, we were there and we made mistakes. No question, we made mistakes. But we knew we had to defeat Hitler. We knew we had to come together with our friends. When you talk to an American, they have the potential for being extremely loyal. When things get political, not so much. But in real life, Americans are actually quite loyal to their friends. and they love life and they love culture, which is why we've had one of the largest immigrations in all of history to America. You know, tens of millions of people immigrate, and they come for different reasons. They come in the past, they came here because it was a land of opportunity, because there was no socialism. Well, there was socialism, but it wasn't at the extent that was in Europe. They came here because of sometimes rock and roll and freedom and religious freedom and all sorts of things like that. That's America at our best, is America when we project freedom. So I would say look at us at our best and remember that and learn from that and be aware of our potential to go to the other side. Wealth and money divorced from integrity can destroy anybody. And Americans are wealthy. I mean, we tend to be very wealthy as a nation, and that can make you self-centered unless you hold on to your beliefs and principles. So if you were to ask me what is the biggest failure of the Trump administration, it's that we have abandoned our core liberty-loving identity. That's why Ronald Reagan was great. Maybe you didn't like all of Ronald Reagan's politics, but there's one thing which was sure. He hated communism. He loved freedom. And he was going to support people that fought for freedom. And he talked about that all the time. By the way, he also hated tariffs and opposed them. So I say, look to America at our best, lovers of liberty, hospitable, welcoming people, avoid us at our worst. And that will be a meaningful message after we win, after the war is over, because that's when you're going to need it, because Ukraine has to shake off forever and ever and ever every vestige of the ancient Soviet totalitarian, authoritarian past and think like free people, which means you have to be self-controlled, self-governing, and visionary.
Absolutely. One thing I know about Americans is that they can drink more than you. Like, specifically more than me. I remember it was like 2000.
Wow.
2003 probably. There was an American Ukrainian ensemble from Chicago called Hromovitsa. So basically, kids and grandkids of Ukrainians who immigrated to the United States, and oh my God, like they were going on tour around Ukraine. It's a dance ensemble, so they were going around Ukraine, and I was making a documentary about them back then. And I remember, oh my God, every single evening, like, and we were like young guys. I was like around 20. Those guys were something like my age, maybe just a bit older. I like seriously every single evening I'm like, I give up. I will just go and sleep. And you know, I was trying to find my hotel room because those guys were insane. And then you realize that generally, you know, it's like American genes. American people are like generally big people, right? Like strong people. And those who arrived to the United States back in those years, they were also big people from Ukraine, like lumberjacks, like people who did, you know, like hard work, and it's in their genes. And I remember I'm like, tonight I'm only drinking beer. The guys were like, all right, I will join you, we'll only drink beer. That like midnight, I'm like, I give up. I cannot breathe, and I just, you know, crawl to my room. But one thing that you mentioned regarding the fighting inside your country, regarding being torn apart, this is something that I would also like to point out. I'm not sure if it's Trump's guilt or if it's his communication officers to blame, because his communication specialists, they are, I'm sorry, motherfuckers. I hate them so much because they like literally those jokes, you know, your mama joke, it's like the level of the first grader. So one thing that I wanted to point out, for example, there is this protest, No Kings, right? And Trump, instead of trying to unite his nation, he's doing completely opposite. He says like those people are shit, and he posts those amazing AI videos. Even Yanukovych, all right, even Ukrainian dictator, the one who fled to Russia, even this idiot, in the beginning, of course, he tried to build his election campaign on literally dividing Ukraine into three sorts. I remember those social advertisements when he was saying like, look, Ukraine is made of three sorts of people. Like these people think that they're Ubermenschen, on the West Ukraine, then like lower quality people, and Donbass, the lowest quality people. And he literally tried to divide people like that in his social advertisement. But even during the revolution in Ukraine, his communication experts were so professional and so cunning. I hate them. I wish them like the worst things possible, of course. But they were trained probably by Russians so well. Paul Manafort, by the way, Paul Manafort. They were so good, so they were still trying to say like, no, like we are not fighting against each other. I remember those things. He tried to manipulate like, no, majority of Ukraine supports Russia. We all love Russia. Only like tiny percent of people over there, like on Maidan, like 10 people under that stage, they are literally bought by Nuland, all right? She bribed them with cookies. But he tried to present it as if, like, majority Ukrainians support Russia, support Yanukovych, support corruption and all that filthy pro-Russian politics. And it was absolutely crazy. And currently Russia is trying to continue this path. Basically, when they invaded in 2022, the main reason why there were such insane casualties among the Russian terrorists was because they expected us to welcome them with apple pies, with flowers, with candies. They expected that Ukrainians are literally, like repressed by this Nazi regime of Jewish President Zelensky, and they expected Ukrainians to finally hug their Russian brothers. And that is why basically we were shooting them point blank and they were dying like without understanding what's going on, By the way, did you happen to talk to somebody who participated in the HOSTOMEL operation?
Yes, in fact, I did. When I was early on, I did. And of course, that was very interesting. And I did some filming in the area up there. Boy, there's so much to talk about, Starsky. What we've just ended up. I don't want to get off HOSTOMEL operation, but I'll just make one comment on where we just came from. You cited Caroline Levitt. You didn't mention her, but she's the one that said your mom. And it's one thing for people to tell jokes privately amongst themselves, but the leaders of the nation set the tone for an entire country. And it's like, in America, we have an expression called Billy Bob. Billy Bob is like your drunk, fat uncle who lives by the creek. And we've become a nation of Billy Bobs, where the leaders of our nation use the most coarse language when talking to children and to the whole country, and when we resort to the stupidest jokes. And we have lost the ability, or at least at the White House has lost the ability, to distinguish between confidence, legitimate confidence, and arrogance and pride. And I think that Americans are best when we are confident but humble. We have to be humble. Everything could disappear in a minute. Everything could be gone in a minute. We don't know what tomorrow brings. We are not gods. We are mortals, and we need to have humility. And right now, our leaders are discipling the entire country to be arrogant and to be mean and to be vicious and to be cruel. And that's a problem. And you've touched on that. And I see how that's affecting our children, because that's how you raise gangsters. It's not how you raise civilized people. So that's my comment on that. Your thoughts on HOSTOMEL operation?
I wanted to ask you about this one because that's actually my brigade that was stationed in HOSTOMEL, and we were there on the first day. Yeah. And all that crazy shit happened literally in front of my eyes, but unfortunately Only later,
Wow.
in the later stage of this operation, I remember like, oh shit, I'm actually a press officer here, so I picked the camera and started recording. But it was absolutely crazy, and I wanted to know, like, what do you know about this, and if you talked with the guys who were there?
No, we went and visited the area after the fact and talked to people on the street who had been there when things happened, but I did not actually speak with or talk to anybody that was engaged in any of that. Mine was afterwards. Of course, we followed it with great interest because of how important it was. And I think I climbed up on top of the tank that was still there in the street somewhere and got a picture with my son. There could be books and books and books and movies upon movies upon movies made about the heroism and the crazy stuff that took place, especially at the very, very beginning. It's to me, it's very fascinating. And yet in America, our leader is still saying that the reason why the Russians were pushed out was because of the mud. It's pretty disturbing to me.
Fuck, mud. Like the whole column stuck in mud. Really? Jesus Christ. Tanks are made for mud. Literally, tanks feel better in the field somewhere. Like, of course, the trucks won't go there, but tanks, BMDs, they are freaking made to cross muddy terrains, and like that's completely insane. The whole column that was obliterated by Ukrainian Bayraktars, Ukrainian fighter jets, attack aircraft, artillery, of course. That's a fact. But like they stuck in the mud. Holy shit! I still cannot cope with that. But I remember Doug Lyman actually visited HOSTOMEL Airport one time. Doug Lyman, the director of Mr. and Mrs. Smith and other movies with like Jason Statham. I really hope that he will play me in his upcoming movie about HOSTOMEL if it's ever made. Yeah, that's why
Jason Statham. Yeah,
that's why I'm
works.
like, not growing my hair. I cannot do that. But that was absolutely freaking insane. And every single year in February, after that, I received tons of calls from journalists who actually want to go there and talk to the guys. You know what? There were a bunch of conscripts in the brigade. The whole personnel at the base at the moment was approximately 200 men, and majority of them were supply battalion young guys, conscripts, that were like 19, 21 years old. And they were the main force that was actually fighting against those Russian paratroopers, elite Spetsnaz from Dzerzhinsk, Desheve, Pskov, and they kicked their ass so bad. I talked to them and they were like, shit, like they're walking across the fields, like relaxed and everything. I'm like, so what did you do? So, like, we started shooting, they started falling down, and then only then they started moving tactically, and like they were trained. Like the hell, something that we could not understand. They were so much convinced that they can just go to HOSTOMEL, land there, and basically everything will be fine. They will take it without fight or something like that. You know the craziest thing about HOSTOMEL?
Tell me.
There are about 100 helicopters involved, Russian helicopters. There were like cargo helicopters, Mi-8 and stuff, but there were also a bunch of Ka-52, Mi-24, and things like that. So the craziest thing was that the commanders of the squadrons, they were literally high-ranked officers. They were colonels, sub-colonels, Russian sub-colonels. It's as crazy as, for example, letting a colonel command a platoon of soldiers. Just think about that. And the reason they did it, because they wanted awards, they wanted medals, they wanted glory. And when they came to HOSTOMEL, literally commanding the squadrons of those helicopters, they expected that Hostomel will be taken like this. And a lot of them actually died. My guy, the one who commanded the man-pad groups in Hostomel that day, he said that later, he shot down first Ka-52 actually. He said that later, when the intelligence already collected data, they told him that he actually improved several Russian colonels sitting in freaking attack helicopters. How crazy is that?
Incredible. I think they have to, the whole VDV has to look at this as one of the great stupidities and losses. You're talking about such 100 helicopters. That's absolutely incredible, being defended by you and the other men, which is out there. And of course, they took out the Antonov, which was a tremendous loss to Ukraine, and a real tragedy that happened. Very deliberate on their part to break Ukrainian morale and to hurt us out there. But that's a movie. Hostomel is a movie in and of itself. I was with people in Irpin and who had been in Bucha during the occupation and the mass murders that were taking place in Bucha. And they were running, this one man who was actually a Baptist pastor, a wonderful guy named Ruslan, was running operations back and forth to Hostomel to rescue people in the area out there, going through incredibly dangerous areas to find people, to pull them out. And this is another part of the story. While you and your troops are fighting the VDV and these high-ranking officers, crazy, that have landed there with the Spetsnaz, you have this entire Ukrainian infrastructure of civilians that are organizing escape and help and rescues and various things like that. Things are moving so fast, they're confusing, but Ukrainians immediately rise to the occasion. I was later in his backyard, and he showed me how everything was destroyed, but his house somehow missed being destroyed. And we were looking at this area behind this church where they were, and which is now a place where Ukrainian children play sports. And he said, just right at the edge where the trees are, that's where the fighting was taking place. He said, it's all right there. And, we were watching that, and people came out that you wouldn't have expected to join with the Ukrainians that were defending. I really believe that what Ukraine did during the first week, it's the stuff of legends. It's the stuff of cinema and movies. I have spoken to people who played very special roles on the 24th, 25th, especially in the air. And I've told them when the war is over, my friends who are F-16, they were pre-F-16, but they were flying Ukrainian planes. I've said, please let me make your movie. I want to do the Tom Cruise blockbuster, because the world needs to know about the courage of the Ukrainian people during that first week.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to know my hardest memory about that day is when the battle continues several hours, and our guys are literally running out of ammo. And the conscripts, there were 2 platoons positioned at the airport because it was like across the fence. And we had 1 platoon, the 3rd platoon of conscripts in the reserve. They later moved in. And the commander of that tactical group, he looks at one of the guys who just stands there, and he asks, why aren't you fighting? Do you have like stupor or something, He's like, no, I don't have ammo anymore. Because according to the standards, you receive 4 magazines and you receive a bunch of additional ammo in packages. Like, that's it, basically. And he says, I don't have ammo anymore. So, eventually we had to withdraw because we ran out of ammo. At the base of the unit, we were shooting at the helicopters, which turned out to be effective because we damaged Ka-52, like I saw it with my eyes, the incredible flying Russian tanks. But eventually we had to withdraw. We were completely dry, meaning completely empty, no ammo at all. And platoons and platoons of our guys are moving through the street of Hostomel, and I see people, and there's a bunch of those tiny houses, like country houses, And people just stand there at the gates. They look at us literally with tears in their eyes, and they go like, why are you leaving us? And we go, we cannot fight. We have no ammo. And that shit is so hard, man. Like when you're there, you don't, you just don't react because like you don't have any emotions. You just work, all right. And then later, when you start analyzing this, I remember like there were women standing there and saying like, guys, where are you going? And our commander says, we will return. I promise we will return. And we did. 1 month later, we returned. And HOSTOMEL was very, very hard to recognize after that. Because basically, you saw it yourself.
Yeah. Starsky, let me ask you a question. So you were part of the 4th Rapid Reaction Brigade, is that correct?
Yes,
is that your group?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're part of the 4th Rap. And you guys, as I understand it, and maybe you can help me, the CIA actually gave information of an imminent attack on HOSTOMEL, but the Antonon State Enterprise was restricting the National Guard from coming in and prepping there. Is that accurate, or do we have misinformation on that?
100%. We couldn't build positions, we couldn't dig trenches, so basically we just positioned our BTRs and our ZU-23-2 cannons.
Right. So you had like one ZU-23-2 and you had a 9K-38 IGLA, a couple of those, and not a whole lot else, right? Is that right?
2 ZU-23-2.
Right about that?
We had a couple BTRs.
Okay, 2 ZU-23.
Yeah, and I believe it's something like 6 manpads, and that's basically it. And also several howitzers positioned not far from the very base. We used them to strike the airfield, but that was like, I know about the CIA, but the fact is we were deployed literally a day before, right? Like majority
on the 23rd, right?
22nd we arrived to the Donbass, yeah, and we were deployed there. 21st we departed from the training camp. 22nd, 23rd we arrived there, and the guys were deployed there with tanks, with artillery, with like everything else. And another thing is that there was Mi-8, the helicopter that Russians actually blew up themselves. It was on the ramp. It was blown up because they couldn't use it anymore. And the black box was still inside. So when they left, they left the black box still there. And we brought it to the SBU or HUR, I don't know, and they deciphered the black box. So what they told us was actually very interesting. Like, I'm not really sure that I'm telling the state secrets anyways. So they said that the pilot of this Mi-8, he was flying through Chernobyl area, and then he took the course towards the HOSTOMEL airfield. And he was talking on the radio to the command, and he asked his Russian command, like, where do I go next? Like, what's the distance? Give me heading and give me distance. They go, this is your heading, this is your distance, and when you arrive, there will be a beacon. It will show you the way. What does it mean? It means that at the airfield, someone literally planted a beacon. And we also know that the CEO, the former CEO, the older dude of Antonov, he is actually prosecuted for literally being a spy. How crazy is that?
I didn't know that. Wow. Yeah. So do you think that had something to do with the resistance that they gave you in setting things up in appropriate time before the Russians arrived? Because the guy was a spy?
My personal opinion is 100%. I remember this dude, he would often come to the base. For example, we had, like on the parade ground, we had this alignment and some holiday or stuff like that. Generally, when authorities visit the base to congratulate soldiers or whatever, and they talk about the war. It was before the full scale. When they talk about the war, of course, they mention, Ukrainian soldiers who sacrificed their lives, Russian terrorists, Russian aggressor, basically. And he would always be like, he always spoke Russian, and he was like, we have to stop this stupid war at any cost and stuff like that. That's literally what he was saying to the soldiers. I remember that because I was there all the time. I was there with the camera all the time, and and he was opposing us in terms of building positions there. We were not given approval. That's
Wow.
absolutely crazy. Yeah.
Do you personally have any of the footage you shot during that time, or did you hand it all in?
I have some footage, but unfortunately, it's already during the withdrawal. I have some footage of the final shootout when our guys were providing covering fire for the conscripts, and the conscripts withdrew. Then the officers withdrew, and basically we, with the commander, were the last to withdraw. And some of the footage, like air threat and things like that, but not much, unfortunately, because. When the fight started, we were all involved. Like there were our military firefighters who were literally finding position near my office. I had an office that could look at the airfield and inside the base. So we were running between those two positions because the helicopters were flying all the time trying to attack us. And those military firefighters literally were the guys who damaged the Ka-52 that later had to land in the field with the AK fire. It was crazy.
Incredible. So, at a certain point, Zaluzhny recognizes that this bridgehead, which has been established by the Russians at Hostomel, has to be challenged. He sends the 2nd Mechanized Brigade out there, and that's when you're part of that with the 4th Rapid Reaction Brigade. But at some point, you've got these Russian Su-25s that are coming down and that are bombarding you. Now, I spent an evening talking with one of the pilots that was active that night for Ukraine. I can't be 100% certain because he wasn't allowed to tell me the specific areas that he was fighting, but I intuited from talking to him, based on what he shared with me, that it might have been Hostomel. I can't be 100% sure for that, but I do know that he engaged U.S. Su-24 and MiG-29s on that particular night, and those were two of the planes that you were dealing with over Hostomel that were coming down. They were fighting. They were hitting you guys on the ground. And I also know that you have the whole situation that came up where the Russian reinforcement plane basically got driven out and had to go back and return to Russia. I guess a question I'm really curious about is, did you see the Su-24s? Did you see the MiG-29s? Were you able to witness any Ukrainian engagement of our flyboys against the Russian Air Force while you were on the ground at Hostomel?
So I saw Su-25, the Frogfoot, I saw them. Probably there was a dogfight, but the clouds were very, very low. The clouds were basically maybe 1,000 feet above. So I saw Su-25. I remember them very, very well because the guys are withdrawing. I'm walking across our parade grounds, and someone shouts air, and everybody falls down. And basically, there's gray asphalt, and I'm wearing everything green backpack, everything green, and I'm just lying on the ground like a beautiful green spot. And I can see the Su-25 diving below the clouds, so I can see it.
Wow.
And the dude is flying slowly, quite slowly, like above the base. And he's like tilting the aircraft and looking down at us. You could literally see the dude himself because it was so low. And he tilts the aircraft, he looks at us, and he's like, flies past.
Wow.
That was crazy. So I definitely think that was a Russian Su-25 because they had like this swampy greenish camo on them. Later, I saw Ukrainian Su-24 attack aircraft that bombed the very runway. They had gray pixel Ukrainian camo, so those were our guys. But it was like 3 p.m. already, like later in the afternoon. Yeah, but those Su-25, they were menacing, absolutely.
Did you see any planes go down?
I didn't see any other planes, but again, the clouds were very, very low. And
Okay.
if the dogfight took place, apparently they were fighting just a bit higher, so I cannot tell.
I'm curious because I did have a very significant conversation with the man who was responsible for the first Russian plane to be downed. He was part of that process, and I've always wondered where his exact location was, and he described some things for me, but he can only say so much. He has to be very careful, and he can't tell me a lot, so I have to kind of try to figure it out myself. But what took place at Hostomel is a movie. I think it's incredible that you were there. Absolutely incredible. And what you described just here for your viewers about just the pain of having to leave people and say, I'll come back later. Oh, because of lack of ammunition. By the way, there's a very similar story in American military history of General Douglas MacArthur having to pull out of the Philippines. And the people are saying, don't go, don't go. And he historically said, I'll be back. Took him a little bit longer to get back than it took for you guys to get back. But that's a terrible feeling for a defender to have to withdraw. These courageous Ukrainians at Hostomel. But the whole story of how the Antonov team were connected to Russia, this is just deeply disturbing. And who knows what might have happened if they hadn't set up those roadblocks for you to simply set things up between the 23rd and the 24th. It's incredible. And you also mentioned, and this is a point, Art, that viewers really need to be aware of. The Russians were lied to themselves a lot. They were lied to by Russian command. They were lied to by Putin with this idea that the people wanted to be freed. The troops that came into Bucha are these really kind of backwood Russian troops from parts of Russia where people have very low standards of living. They don't know very much. And they were told, yeah, you're going to rescue people from the Nazis. And they went into the homes in Buchas and they said, where are the Nazis? Where are the Nazis? Where are the Nazis? And I have a friend who I interviewed who received a certain amount of notoriety because he and his wife, they pulled out of Bucha just in time. The Russians went into their home and stole their Nintendo and their Game Boys. And they handed over the tracking device that was in the Nintendo and the Game Boys to the Ukrainians. And we were able to track the Russians because they were so desirous for all the technology. They came in looking for their washer machines, looking for the toys, and that ended up leading to some problems for them. But the Russians were so backwards in their thinking. They were so misled themselves to think they'd get victory parades and find Nazis. 15, 20 minutes ago, you and I were talking about the power of Putin's propaganda. And there's probably nobody in the world who's been more affected by Putin's propaganda than the Russians themselves. They're true believers. They really believe the lies that they're given over and over and over again. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. Antonov team, by the way, amazing guys, but all the criminal orders actually came from the former CEO. The guys are actually very, very good. I remember after the liberation of Hostomel and the airport, we were there and they were showing us everything. And we actually found a body in the car. What left out of the person was literally 2 legs, because Russian helicopter hit it
Wow.
with a rocket and the car
Wow.
burned. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, but I felt so happy when I learned that former chief of the company that he went to jail, because that's completely insane. He
I have a
was
question.
yeah.
Well, Ukrainians do not have the death penalty. I'm curious, why not?
Because we are Ukrainians. You're not allowed to have death penalty if you're a European country. So
Okay, I see. I see. That's right. In America, in some places we do. I'm just curious when you have these just these horrible people that lead to the death of many and the murder and torture of Ukrainians, and then Ukrainians have to pay for them in prison for the rest of their lives. But I understand.
On the other hand, I think that this punishment is much better than death, because death is fast, and
Hmm.
when the fuck has to spend the rest of his days behind the bars, thinking about what he's done, because
Hmm.
when you spend time together with other people, all right, it's a
Hmm.
different thing. But when you're in a single cell forever,
Hmm.
that's a completely different thing. Again, as a former cop, I can tell I can tell a lot about that. It changes. Yeah, it
So
changes.
Starsky, I want to be at the front of the line now that you've shared this amazing, and I know you've shared it elsewhere, and there have been some great articles on you in Newsweek, and you've been talked about around the world for what you've done, which is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, actually. But I want to be at the front of the line to ask to make your life movie, the Battle of Hostomel, because that needs to be a film, that needs to be a story. That story in and of itself is so remarkable, and it's interesting that when we look back at great military conflicts of the last 100 years, and I'm thinking specifically of Frank Cappa on the D-Day beaches, it's the photographer and the war correspondent who gets the stories out, who films things that end up being the storytellers that we get our narratives from. So it's very, very important. I live down the street from the Alamo, which is a very famous battle that took place in Texas history. And there's only one reason we know about the Alamo. And the reason is everyone died, everyone got killed, except for one man who was the storyteller. And they said, you have to leave because everyone needs to know what really happened. So I think the role of storytellers, it's just so significant. And you're that man. You're the right guy to be that guy.
Thank you. Well, this is the reason why I'm here, why I'm talking about this, and I will be absolutely happy to help you with the movie, because the guys that were there, they were fabulous. I cannot find a
Hmm.
different word. The young guys, young Ukrainian conscripts, 21 years old after the battle, sweaty, and they are not excited, but nervous and excited at the same time. And I was with them in the truck going to Kiev, and I'm like, so what's your impressions? They're like, so much better than Call of Duty. Holy shit! And they were like, they were happy. They were absolutely happy after that battle. They were like sharing those impressions. Of course, after that, when my guys were sent to Irpin already several days after that. That was a different experience, because a lot of our guys unfortunately
Hmm.
died. The situation there and defense of that very region, Moshun, was absolutely crazy, because we
Hmm.
had absolutely no ammunition to, for example, fight against Russian tanks. There were Russian tanks 1.5 kilometers away, and all you have is like RPG-7. Rick the Ukrainian, by the way, is in the chat. Hello, hello, brother. RPG-7, which is effective most like 300 meters max, all right, if you're lucky.
Hmm.
And we were there just like literally like targets, like living targets, and it was absolutely insane. I lost so many friends. One of our guys, the colonel, that was I can call him my friend, because I know him for such a long while, since 2016. He became a hero of Ukraine, actually. And
Uh-huh.
that's like
Okay.
that's a crazy story, because I saw his wife, and we talked
Hmm.
when the memorial was established in Kiev, and his name was there. And
Hmm.
she talked to me and to our internal affairs officer, and she's like, "Are you sure that it was him?" Definitely, because the story was that he went there, he was wounded in the stomach, and then they put him on the BTR. And then the Russians hit the BTR, and he burned together with the BTR. And the only thing that was left is basically his leg. And she's like, are you sure that it was him? We're like, yes, we're sure. First of all, the DNA, and second of all, like the guys saw it. Like, unfortunately, he could not survive. And you know that hope that she still had, even though there are so many guys that say, yeah, that was him. But even despite that, she still had hope, which is something very, very typical, you know, for people who lose somebody, because even though you know for a fact that it happened, but you still keep this faith that they're alive.
I'll tell you, Starsky, I've seen that over and over again with people. It's really helpful for them to have finality. In fact, I have an article going up in the Kyiv Post. Hopefully it'll be out this week. And I spent about 6 months interviewing a friend of mine who's the wife of a hero of Ukraine, one of the F-16 pilots. And last week I interviewed her about right after her husband was killed and what goes on in the mind and the hope that you have, even as you see the men coming to you in the uniform. They're going to bring you information. You think, maybe he was just injured. Maybe he was captured. For a lot of Ukrainians, they realize that being captured is sometimes worse than dying. They understand what that means to be captured by the Russians. I will say one last thing about Irpin, and I'm a little reluctant to say this, but the other part of me feels like it must be said. My son and I went, and we were filming where the battle took place by the bridge and various things in Irpin. And I interviewed a number of religious leaders, both from Bucha and from Irpin. And now this is after time has gone by since the battle. I'm sitting down with these leaders. And this one man is a pastor. And I'm actually talking to him in the backyard where fighting took place. And I asked him, what is the biggest challenge that you've had as a religious leader trying to help the people? And he said, well, my job is to counsel the girls that have been raped and impregnated by Russians. And there are a lot of them. He said they want to kill themselves. They're all suicidal because of what they endured. Not only were they raped repeatedly, but they watched their fathers and their brothers executed, bullet to the back of the head by the Russians. They saw their mothers raped, little boys raped. The Russians, it's just difficult to explain. When you tell these to Americans, they don't believe it. It's like walking into a concentration camp. The horror is too terrible for people to believe. But that is how the Russians operated. And you have these, very precious women in Ukraine today who are still alive, but don't want to be alive, some of them, because of what they went through. That's my memory of Irpin. Not just the battle, but the consequence of the battle and what happened afterwards. I think the last thing I'll say about Irpin, and also Bucha, which is part of the Ukrainian story we started our conversation on, is that Ukrainians are the first people to rebuild. The minute something is destroyed, they rebuild. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. When you walk down the streets of Bucha today, you can look at the photographs that were taken with tanks and bodies and dead. It's all gone. It's completely rebuilt. Ukrainians rebuild. They're constantly moving forward. And they find people to help them. It costs a lot of money to rebuild. And they did the same thing in Irpin. You can still see, in fact, I made a little film on this. You can see, the machine gun bullets everywhere. And you can still see the houses that have been destroyed all over Irpin, and in parts of Bucha as well. But Ukrainians never quit. They never, ever, ever quit. And the fact that they're rebuilding is part of that story.
Absolutely. Trine mentioned that doctors who treated those girls ended up with PTSD too, and I can confirm that. I have many friends who actually went to places like Makarev, Motyzhin, where more mass graves were uncovered. I only saw the one in Bucha. I brought many journalists there, many journalists from different countries. Yeah. But they went all the way, and they said that those bodies that we were revealing they were just they're crazy, like little kids that were. That's absolutely insane. And I had to take because this soldier, she was a woman actually, and when we met, she had like empty eyes, empty stare, and I had to take her to a sushi place, like feed her, make sure that she's fine, because she could barely speak about this stuff.
For those of you that are just meeting me on Starsky's podcast, I'm director of an organization called Ukraine Story. And if I'm going to tell you just about an article that I hope you'll read. I have a Substack. It's called Lights, Cameras, Freedom with DW PHILLIPS. I encourage you to subscribe, and you can read about what I'm about to tell you there. But one of the men that was part of the founding of Ukraine Story, my organization, was one of the first responders into Bucha. He was a United States a captain. He was an officer who left the U.S. military to fight with Ukrainians and to help them. And he walked into Bucha 2 days, day and a half, 2 days after the Russians left. He had no idea what he was going to find. And he ended up being part of the cleanup team. One of his missions was to go into the homes and to find all the evidence of the Russian brigades and units that were there and any of the Russian soldiers so that we could go after them for war crimes. But he was also part of the process of picking up the bodies, which were still on the streets. When he walked in there, everything was still there. And one of the men that was with him, who's not with my organization, but was a former U.S. Air Force officer, he was so messed up by this trip. I mean, he was psychologically destroyed, psychologically completely destroyed by walking into Bucha and everything that they saw there. This is a whole nother, issue for us, is that how do we take care of all the people whose minds and souls and spirits have been destroyed because of what Russia has done. It's not a small issue, but Bucha is not the only place at all. There are many places where these atrocities have happened, but Bucha will always play a lead role in the narrative to the world because it was so early on in the fight and because the cruelty was so extraordinary. We have, as some of you may know, we actually have captured audio transmissions between Russian soldiers and their mothers back in Russia, in which the mothers are encouraging them to shoot the children. That's a fact. That isn't some fantasy. We have the transmissions. The barbarism and the evil is absolutely extraordinary, and it's so much that people don't realize it, which is why when Sergei Lavrov gets on television and says, oh, this is a false flag operation. We didn't do this. This didn't happen. Look at the pictures. The bodies are moving. This is fake. Sadly, many Americans believe Sergei Lavrov over the evidence. And when this comes up to me as a filmmaker, as a person who is in Bucha and Irpin, as a person with friends that were there, who've interviewed people that survived, it's one of the few times I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. How do you argue with that level of ignorance? And how do you argue with that? I don't know what to say because it's terrible.
I completely agree on that. But unfortunately, there will always be people who will fall for Russian disinformation. One thing that makes me vaguely satisfied is that big part of those 11 or 14 battalion tactical groups that were in that Kiev Oblast, well, actually, most of them died. And the Russian paratroopers, actually those 300, between 250 and 350 Russian paratroopers, Spetsnaz, all that, mighty Russian shit, they lost at least 80 men, they're dead. That's confirmed information coming from the Ukrainian prisoners who actually had to collect the bodies because Russians could not find a single Ukrainian body among the bodies on the ground. So they told Ukrainian prisoners to collect them. They said, we had 80. We collected 80 bodies. They dropped them in the truck. Yeah, and at this point, you cannot find actually a lot of Russian paratroopers who can talk to you about what happened in HOSTOMEL because they became better Russians. So that's something that makes me vaguely satisfied. And generally speaking, for example, if we talk about Bucha, I completely agree. Like the level of restoration is something that amazes even myself. I remember 2023 in the winter, I was making a video from the invincibility point. Actually, invincibility point in Bucha was probably the best in the area, because there was this huge tent with the big sticker on it saying that this tent came from the beautiful state of Canada. And I was like literally making selfies, near this label, because it was just so inspiring. Kudos to Canadians. And I was inside. There was a blackout, of course, and there were people just sitting, the whole families, and enjoying tea, watching some video on a television, either news or something like that. There were cops, and of course it was. We saw Jane's poster there. Yes, BT, the Jane, Sergeant Jane from my brigade, a girl that turned into a warrior. Her story is completely amazing. She went through Bakhmut, she went through Rubizhne. She's insane. And her poster was also there among other faces. And there were so many good memories about those places that emerged eventually. Like the way we can describe Bucha and HOSTOMEL generally as a story of not success, but the story of revival, story of resurrection. We were impressed with the local people, the guys that were cleaning the streets. I remember first days after the liberation, it was very, very hard to even drive down the street, because there were so many, fragments and stuff like that, a lot of different garbage, burnt Russian shit around, and it was really easy to puncture the tires. And then we just literally cleaned up everything so fast and so cool. I remember our guys also helped to clean the HOSTOMEL airport. They found like Russian legs sticking out of the ground, and Russian orc got lost, and there was like his leg sticking out of the ground. And they called the investigator, they called the cops. They go like, dude, we have like Russian, his leg is sticking out of the soil. And the investigator is like, the detective, because he has to arrive, he has to collect the body and everything else, do all the procedures, write the report. And he's like, can you please dig him out for me? Our guys are like, are you kidding? Take a shovel and do it yourself. And he's like, yeah, well, all right, just bury him back. Just bury that motherfucker back. I don't care. So that's what we did. So many.
So Starsky,
yeah.
Starsky, were you in Bucha day 1, 2, 3 after the Russians withdrew?
I was in different places, mostly protecting the strategic objects in Kiev together with the team.
I see.
Because
I'm just curious. I was just curious if you were there at the same time that our good friend who we work with was there at the same time. But I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, we were there literally like first days after the liberation, like first days of April, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It's easy to trace actually, because one of my videos was made exactly the day I returned from there, and I edited the video and published it on my channel. So it's like.
Okay, so you were there. You were there in April 1 and 2?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, did you meet any Americans while you were in Bucha that day?
I met Canadians. There was Canadian television 100%, and I went with them to that mass grave. And after that, I met a lot of different journalists, American journalists, Canadian. I remember there were, not Hungarian, Czech journalists, a lot of them. So I was literally bringing books there. Yeah.
Our guy was there as a soldier. He was there with the Ukrainian groups. He was an American who was serving alongside the Russians and who was tasked with some special stuff. I'm just curious, because it's always interesting when you find out your friends are in the same place and they meet each other. But I mean, Butch is just, I've interviewed a bunch of soldiers. Many of them are dead now because they would be 105 years old, 104 years old. But I've interviewed many who were the liberators that went into concentration camps. I have a friend who died last year who was one of those liberators. It's always interesting to me to try to understand the experience they have when you walk into hell. You're basically walking into hell. You never forget it. It's hard to talk about for your whole life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I cannot say this about myself. I think I was rather lucky because, when our group, the platoon, was prepared from our officers and sent to Irpin, I actually was in this platoon because we didn't involve our conscripts. The conscripts would go with me basically to Juliana airport, to different strategic objects that we had to protect in Kiev. But we, out of those soldiers, out of the officers basically that we had, we gathered a platoon, and actually I was in that platoon before it departed. And when it was basically preparing to depart, the commander told me dude, you're doing media, your work is here. And yes, sir. So I was doing my duties. But the guys that went in this platoon to Irpin and fought there, the colonel that died, and some of the guys from our reconnaissance company as well, some of them got injured there. That stuff was absolutely crazy. Absolutely.
Wow. Amazing. Well, these are stories that we're going to be telling our children and our grandchildren. And I'm hoping here in America there will be a day when the Russian propaganda has been, destroyed, and Americans have an open heart to really, really get it. And of course, there are many who do today. It's unfair to think of America as a monolithic, one-size-fits-all approach. No, there are many, many people, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions, that support Ukraine. But the loudest people are the people that have been, they represent a small fraction, but they're the loudest. And they're the people that have been affected by Russian propaganda. And Bucha is an example. It's just, I really, when people start talking about justice or something like this, and they don't care about Bucha, they don't care about Ukraine, I find it very hard to take them seriously.
Yeah, 100%. And I have a question for you.
Yes.
What is the best way to unite American society, in your opinion? Because you are a filmmaker, the human soul, and you also know the American soul as an American yourself. What do you think about this?
I'm a strange guy because I'm both an attorney and I'm also a filmmaker and a writer, of course. And so I think in terms of two things. I think in terms of the foundations of our culture and our society, which are really based on 2,000 years of ethics that says there is a right and there is a wrong, and we should stand for right and we should oppose wrong. Right now, Americans are being fooled into thinking that right and wrong doesn't matter, that what matters is who's the winner. And that needs to change. And the second thing that needs to change, now talking about me as a filmmaker and why movies like Kiev of mine are so very important, and I hope everybody will watch them, is that if we lose our humanity, if the Russian leadership and what they've taught their people do not believe in humanity, they believe in Russians. And that's not an exaggeration. I'm not just making that up. That isn't some hatred towards Russia just because I don't like Russians. No, that is their philosophy. That is their belief system. Americans are supposed to believe that life is a gift, that all life matters, that humans matter, that we share a common bond, that truth ultimately is transcendent. It comes from above. It's not created by the state. It isn't created by Moscow or by Washington, D.C. And I think what's needed to unite America is, number one, it's love. At the end of the day, I'm talking about love. I'm talking about love for fellow humans. I'm talking about love for others. But where does that love come from? It comes from a belief that there are some things worth fighting for. There is right versus wrong, and that all people have a dignity which needs to be honored because they're made by their creator to be dignified, to be people of value and worth. So how do we get there? We need leaders who, unlike Caroline Leavitt saying your mama, who actually appeal to the very best in us, to the very highest ideals. We don't have that presently. I believe that Americans follow good leadership like most people do. And when leaders emerge that are not transactional, but are in fact motivated by higher purpose and who see the dignity of all people, Americans tend to follow suit. They tend to be that way. So we have to return to the old paths. We have to develop our capacity to love and recognize the danger of selfishness and hatred. Those two things are poison. They destroy people. That's why in Kiev of Mine, we mention over and over again, the dignity of the individual, the joy of life, the power of resilience, the beauty of humanity. Why is this war on Ukraine? And I'll end your answer by saying this. You asked me what is needed. What is needed are the very things that are at stake in the battle for Ukraine. Russia is at war with humanity and dignity and love. And Russia is at war with the law that undergirds freedom in society, those two things. And if we don't oppose that, we will lose our own soul. So Americans have to fight for what's right over there, and then we have to model it over here. And the answer to everything is actually respect and love and empathy and appreciation for our fellow man.
Absolutely, beautifully said, my friend. I completely agree with you on that. We need to motivate people. We need to restore the faith in all the beautiful things that are inside of us, that the things that make us human. Because the toxic culture of 2025, everything that you see on Twitter is like it's fun to watch, but on the other hand, it's so destructive. We gotta be, I believe, selfishly altruistic. All right, because whatever we do, we always do for our own benefit. All right, and even when we help other people for free, we do that because this makes us feel good, right? And this is actually the emotion that you will never find anywhere else. You will not buy this feeling for any money when you just help somebody absolutely altruistically, absolutely without demanding anything in return. I think this is something beautiful. And by the way, this is something that decent people of the world keep showing and demonstrating every single day to the Ukrainian people, that they don't demand anything in return for those Bayraktars, drones, shells, and the humanitarian aid that keeps coming to Ukraine, the generators and parts for our power plants and things that, the heaters, those chemical heaters for our soldiers, and stuff like that. That is something that actually I can say Ukrainians can learn from other people, and that is something that makes us better, all right? Something that makes us evolve, because the help that came to Ukraine since 2022 is absolutely enormous, and it's something that you don't see often. People from other countries literally helping other people on the other side of the globe for free without demanding anything in return, simply to prove that they are decent and they are friendly and they are the humankind. That's something absolutely beautiful.
What you have just said is something I've seen all throughout Ukraine, which is gratitude, thankfulness. And gratitude and thankfulness solve a lot of problems. Grateful people are happy people. Grateful people are people who are blessed in life. There's a blessing that comes with being grateful. And I try to remind Americans, why do you have freedom here? For many reasons, but one of them is because the French, the Dutch, and the Spanish helped you win freedom in 1776 and beyond, because people came to help you. And I think being grateful and recognizing what others have done for us will make us all better off. America has a debt of gratitude to Ukraine, just as Ukraine has a debt of gratitude to America. And that's part of the spirit of love that I'm talking about. It's gratitude and appreciation. I believe there is a God in heaven who looks down on men and sees us, and I don't think we are honoring the gift of life that he gave to us when we are completely and totally selfish. Selfishness is the plague of humanity, and Russia is the consummately selfish society. We do not want to be like them. America is becoming selfish. We need to reform, and Ukrainians are proving themselves to actually be a very generous and a very thankful people, and that's why I want Americans to learn more from Ukrainians.
Absolutely. With that, my dear friends, I think it will be a good opportunity to call this a night. DW, what do you say?
I think it's great and wonderful talk. And I had so much fun hearing about HOSTOMEL and talking about everything else. And it's very interesting to see where our mutual interests and experiences converge. I love that. And I hope we get to talk more soon.
Absolutely, absolutely. Same here.
And watch Kyiv of Mine. Watch Kyiv of Mine. Go to the links.
Absolutely. I will tell you my impression and the impression of my lady after watching. I'm sure that she will love this. My dear friends, again, check out the link in the title of this video to go to the Kyiv of Mine YouTube channel, subscribe and watch the documentary series. It's definitely worth watching. Rick the Ukrainian, thank you for staying with us. Sleep well, my friend, and be safe, you and your family. And also big thanks to everyone who supports Ukraine, everyone who stands for the right cause. Ukrainians will never forget this. Thank you so much for your help and support. Dear friends, what can I say? Be safe, and we will see you next time. DW, thank you so much also for joining my stream. And
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Bye-bye.